Hello everybody, this is the Imperial audiophile. I am doing this video to kind of correct something I said wrong in my last video. The efficiency of these Valencia is not 102, it's only about 97.5, and that's coming right from the Altec literature. I looked at some of my old literature and I got mixed up on the A7s -8s, which are 101 dB sound pressure level. These are only 97.5 sound pressure level. The frequency response of an A7-8 1975 circa is 45 hertz to 20 hertz. The frequency response of the Valencia, on the other hand, the same year, and they made these because they put them in a fancier cabinet, the Valencia was 40 to 20,000 kilohertz, according to Altec's literature. So these actually went lower than the A7s that people desire. Right now they go lower. I tested out the low frequency with the stereophile test CD, and I found out between 31 to 25 hertz, there's only about a -3 dB difference between those, where the 25 goes lower. Now, during the same time in 1975, they made the Santana. I had a set of Santanas, and I sold them with my Macintosh equipment, the Santanas. But the Santiagos, you really didn't see much of the Santiagos or the Barcelonas. You didn't see too many of them because I think it could have been the size of the speakers for the Barcelonas. But anyhow, the Valencia here are all the same components as an A7-8. They do go deeper than the A7. Whatever. They both cross over at 800 hertz. And the A7-500Bs, they were the same sound pressure level. They also only went to 45 hertz to 20,000 kilohertz, and they were horn loaded. Now these go lower. So Altec rated them at 40, and I've listened to these go all the way down to 30. But I tested it between 31, which the test CD goes to 25, and there's only a 3 dB difference between 31 hertz to 25 hertz with these speakers. Now, of course, that's with the new baffle wiring and stuff like that. But of course, I'm going to have to tell you, that's not with the anechoic chamber. That's just what I have determined. The Aperion super tweeter matches up because there's a trim pot in the back, as I explained it the last time, that you can adjust. And Altec, I found out, recommended that you would set these speakers with at 2. 2 would be that you would get more horn, and 10 would be that you were getting less power to the horn. And I could never play them at 2, and I'll be honest with you, it was just too much for my ears. You know, it was just too bright, and they were too overpowering. And it sounded like you're listening to nothing but horn and very little bass or mid-range. But so I think the lowest I've ever set them was between, I think, 7, to listen to them in my other house. And here they're set at about 9. 10 is the lowest you can go on them. Here they're set 9. That way, less power is getting to the horn. And then I matched the horn up, of course, to the Aperion super tweeter, so it would match their 96 dB. And since they're only 1.5 dB more powerful than the super tweeter, that's why I was able to match them up. Okay, now things fall into place why you were able to match up the Altecs and make it a 3-way speaker versus a 2-way speaker. Okay, now, after I looked up, I have a pair of Klipsch Heresies, And I start looking up the clip specs and found out a little bit of information. But after the Altec Valencias, then they had changed to 1976 circa to the 19s. Okay. And the 19s were 30 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and they crossed them over at 1200 hertz. So you were using more of the bass than you were the horn, or it was crossover at that point of 8 ohms. So maybe that's why these are able to now go down to 30, because they had changed the cabinetry and they were able to get them down to 30. But anyway, some people desire the 19s over the Valencia. I did not really care for the 19s over the Valencia. They were bigger, only because they had taken the horn and seems like put it on top of the speaker and made it separate. So the distance between your mid-range and deep bass to the horn was separated even more so. Maybe that caused some problems with my ears. Also, they had changed in the 19s compared to the Valencias to the face plugs. The face plugs were plastic, and they were called the tangerine face plugs. They had changed that. They had also had changed and put a damper into the horn, into the body of the horn. They put a damper like a felt or something. If you remember, in that particular cover, the cover, I put a piece of the deadbeat, cut it round and put it in there to dampen that cover and everything, where Altec had actually put a damper in. I think it could be felt. I don't know. I'm just looking at a picture that looks like felt, but the face plug had been changed, and they had changed the name, so that was a modification they did. Whether or not that's something people would care for, it still has the foam around the horn. It's the same horn, but they had finally changed the face plug and did a few modifications to the horn. And the speaker, it looked a little, excuse me, looked a little nicer. Because as the baffle on the Valencia, as I mentioned, was cheap. You'll see a lot of the pictures or even videos of the old Altecs where the baffles are still the black 3/4 inch plywood. People haven't even upgraded the baffles. That was cheap plywood. It wasn't even furniture grade plywood. It wasn't even marine grade plywood that had more plies in it. Marine grade plywood has more plies in it. Okay, where this was a very cheap plywood with only maybe, so many plies into the plywood, and it was just spray painted black, like I said, and only had 4 bolts holding that 15-inch woofer that would come loose about once a year, so you had to go in and tighten them up, where this is using all 8 bolts for that baffle, connected to the baffle for that big 15-inch woofer that's there. So that was one thing I wanted to update everybody on, was the Altec said I was wrong. And when I looked up the clips, now that was another thing I wanted to bring up, is that the Cornwells, at the time I bought my Heresies, you had the Laskellas, you had the Cornwell, they were only rated, I think they're rated higher today, but the Cornwells back then, the Heresies were rated at 96 dB sound pressure level, and the Cornwells were rated only at 98 dB at that time. I think they're higher now. Maybe they have changed to crossovers, speakers, I don't know, for the Cornwells. But I do remember the Heresies were only about 96 dB efficient, and the Altecs were 97.5. So once again, Altec was not as efficient as even the Cornwell. But like I said before, the Cornwells and the Fortes, I don't care for the speakers beyond the Laskellas. I like clip speakers, but I didn't care for them. They seem to be, to me, fatiguing after you listen to them a while. I see a lot of them, they go up for sale. I believe that people buy these speakers, Cornwells, the Fortes, and so on, and they get tired of them. And they don't want to modify them or put any money into them, and therefore they hit the market on the resale market because people are just saying, I heard enough of them. And I'm going to admit it, so are the Altecs that you're looking at. Without the modifications, these can become fatiguing. They got to be tuned with the pot in the back, but even then they can become fatiguing because the horn is a little aggressive. And by accident, I found out that taking the horn and literally getting the foam, and I put it felt on it, and I got the idea said from the Wilson speakers where they put felt around their tweeter. That seemed to take that brightness or that harshness away from the horn, really, and made a huge difference. You don't see this modification, though, on today's horns where they're being resold, but that made a huge difference. And the super tweeter helps with those high ends because it was rolled off. And a lot of people have said that. They claim they're from 40 to 20,000, but a lot of people say that high end, yeah, it's there, but it seems to be rolled off. You can hear it, but something seems to be missing. Some people said, yeah, at about 10,000, it starts rolling off, even though Altec claims it will go up to 20,000. But to drive that home, when I was looking up, I looked up forums, and this is an AK member, Tom Brennan. And Tom Brennan, I knew Tom from Illinois when I lived in Illinois. And Tom is what you call an aficionado of horn speakers. He knows everything about horns. You name it, Altec, JBL, Bozak, you name anything about horns, and he knows all about the different makers. Horn. He is what I call a horn nut. He's very, very good with horns, and he came over and listened to my horns. And on the Altec forum, December 29th, 2014, he made a statement. Now, he heard this system in 2014 and stuff when I still lived in Illinois, and he did make a statement on the Altec forums, and I'm going to read you exactly what his statement was. Now, remember, this guy is I never met a person like Tom that knew so much about horns, and he loved them so much, and everything he ran was off of tube equipment, no solid state. He didn't run his horns off a solid state. They were made for tubes, and he's always used tubes. A lot of people will take like La Scalas or something, which I did. I admitted that I had the Altecs, and I had the Altecs, and I ran them off of Macintosh. But you know what? It just was missing something. I just didn't care for it. And that's the same way with like the La Scalas. The La Scalas, they sound good. And I see a lot of people with La Scalas. They use a Mac. It's like, to me, they're not quite right. It's not a good match. They're just not coherent with each other. But if you have tube, yeah, but it just doesn't seem to match with the solid state. And I remember getting rid of my Macintosh because of that. It just wasn't, there. It wasn't coherent. It just was something missing. But anyhow, getting back to Tom here. Now, this is written in 2014, and I will quote what he read. I heard these speakers often. He's talking about the Valencias because that's what the discussion is back in 2014, what people were talking about. Good bass. Not the deepest, but deep enough for realism and very clean and dynamic. Gorgeous. They are here, quote, as Joe Roberts would say, mid-range. Highs are clean, clear, but rolled off somewhat. Henceforth, the super tweeter. A very dynamic, clear and low distortion speaker and capable of outstanding imaging and soundstage when used properly. One of the best systems I've heard was a set of Valencias used with Conrad Johnson tube gear. My experience and opinion. Now, that's a quote right from Tom back in 2014. The system he's talking about with the Conrad Johnson is the system you are looking at. For some reason, the Conrad Johnson with these Valencias is magic. And it's hard to explain to somebody. I know some people make comments, oh, why don't you play some music on YouTube? Come on. I've never heard anything on YouTube to sound great. It's YouTube. Plus, you have to go through all kinds of with trying to get permission, or you're going to get demonetized for playing music that doesn't belong to you. No, I'm not going to get involved in that. But a long time ago, when we just used to read magazines, as I did in my last videos, they would give you CDs that they used, and they would tell you what they heard on those CDs. That's what I showed you in my last videos. I told you CDs that I used, what I heard on them, and so you then can either download the music or get the music yourself, and you can see if you can hear the same thing off of your system. And I did also make to do the review of the Aperions, okay, Super Tweeter. So in order to do the review, I tell you the CDs I used, what they sound like, did it improve, did it not improve off of these modified Altecs. I also, if you're looking at these Altecs, the baffle alone, I had to have a furniture make them because I don't have the tools to make these baffles. They're over 2 inches thick, and to put the radius on them and the chamfers on them and everything else. I looked it up. They were about almost $600 per baffle. And that's when I had them made by a furniture maker. But instead of buying new speakers, I felt the money being spent was well worth it to get the baffles made. And if it didn't improve it or make a big, huge difference, well, I guess I spent my money for nothing. But it did make an improvement. The baffles are outdated that are on the original Valencias. They needed to be improved. They were distorting. They were causing like a blurriness to the imaging. You probably can't notice it yourself until you hear a pair that where the baffles are over 2 inches thick, has deadbeat behind the baffles. I put deadbeat, which I show in my other videos. Those baffles aren't moving. They're not doing anything. So that 15-inch woofer is you're just hearing the woofer, and you're not hearing distortion. You're not getting any blurriness of that woofer, because that woofer is going all the way, up to 800 hertz, which you have a lot of information going up to 800 hertz as it starts crossing over to your horn speaker. There's a lot of instruments in there that it's playing. So drums, things like that, need to be tight, articulated. And like I said, it was so bad when I first bought these, when I didn't change them. They were stock, right? Okay. And I went to a salon and I listened to some expensive small Avalons. Now these were small, but they were, I think, $7,000 back then, $5,000 to $7,000. I thought, wow, these are expensive, and they only had like a 6-inch or 8-inch woofer with, a tweeter. And they were the small Avalons on a pedestal. And I heard those things and I thought, wow. And I listened to Appalachian Spring, Copeland's Appalachian Spring, made by Tellart. And I listened to that and I said, I have that CD at home, so I want to really hear that. And it blew away the Altecs. Okay. I remember I had Carver equipment and it blew away my system. And I just went home and I thought, this is unbelievable. I cannot believe this, that those Avalons, those little bitty Avalons, blew these big, huge Altecs out of the water. And that's when I realized it could be time to get rid of the speakers. They're probably aged, and you start thinking that. until the owner of the salon, I think his name was Ray, said, no, don't get rid of those Altecs. You're used to them. You got a lot of improvement that those Altecs can play. You're not listening to them the way you should be, and you can make a lot of improvements to those Altecs. Don't get rid of them. Now, here's a guy who could have made good money. He could have said, oh, no, I could sell you some better speaker than those Altecs. They're too old. And, of course, this is why a lot of these Altecs ended up in garages, basements, got beaten up because of that fatigue. And you can get fatigued, which I would get fatigued because they weren't done right. The Altecs need to be brought up to, more modern technology. That's all they need to be done. With a little bit of work, you'll bring these up to $25,000, $30,000 speakers easily. When you listen to them, you'll be blown away that where have we come in 47 years since these speakers were sold? Where have we come with our speakers and our stereo equipment and everything else compared to this old system? Are we really that much better? And the truth is, no. We haven't come that far. Even today, we've come a lot more expensive. We've increased our prices. We've made speakers look better than these Altecs with nice wooden horns, or you get the avant-gardes that, got the big, huge horns that make a big, huge sound. If you have the room for them, and if you have the $25,000 to $30,000 to invest into those horns, fine. But for someone who is middle class and you're trying to get unbelievable horn sound that you can live with the rest of your life, even if you go to the La Scalas or you go to the corner horns, which are huge, but let's say you want to go, that's still what, $13,000 for a set of La Scalas and $17,000, $18,000 for a pair of corner horns. That's a little bit out of a lot of people's budgets. But these will blow away the La Scalas and the corner horns. We compared them to the Audiophile Society. We compared these after they've been modified. Okay, so I want everybody on. After they've been modified to some of the better speakers out there, the Churchills, Tannoy Churchills, those are $20,000 speakers. Okay, people preferred the Altecs. They preferred the sound. It wasn't fatiguing. You can listen to them a long time. You literally fall asleep just listening to the music. Even if it's loud, you can just fall asleep listening to the music. It's just, as one guy said, it sounds like you're at a nightclub. And we got plenty of nightclubs in Chicago. It just sounds like you're at a nightclub. And that's saying a lot for a speaker that's 47 years old, where you can come up and say, the system sounds like you're at a nightclub. You are there. So I just wanted to update you that now the Altecs are a three-way instead of a two-way, and it's just not some people saying it rolls off at the very top. But here is Tom, which I consider to be a guru of horns, okay? And he even says it's very clear, but rolled off at the top, which the super tweeter, the Aperion's super tweeter, puts it back. And I have these crossed over at about 8,000 instead of 10,000. So it's going in. But I cannot notice anything out of place. And of course, I checked with a friend of mine who is an aerospace engineer who works for NASA. Okay, he did batteries. He was an electrical engineer for NASA. I am an aerospace engineer myself. I did not work for NASA. I worked for other things. But he's an aerospace that worked for NASA, and he came over and we were talking about it. He says, as long as you got that tweeter and it's at the same sound pressure level as your horn, he says, they're in phase with each other. So we put a meter up, we tested out the horn, went to the tweeter, tested out the horn. They're playing at the same sound pressure level. He says, then they're matched up. So you'll hear both of them, or they'll integrate together just fine, and which they do. So the super tweeter, you don't overhear it. And I've heard speakers, we all have heard speakers, where the tweeter is a little bright and you can hear cymbals. They sound a little exaggerated. Well, that's because they put more energy in that tweeter, and it could be 3, 4, 5 dB louder, and that will extenuate that high frequency, let's say on cymbals or a triangle that someone's hitting, where this seems to be integrated just right so you get more clarity off the cymbal or the triangle without overdoing it and going over the top, whereas it's like too much. And that's where people become fatigued from the tweeters. So this is just an update that I was wrong. They're not as efficient as I thought, and that's probably a reason I could match these with the super tweeter, the Aperion super tweeter, because if it's rated at 96, these are rated at 97.5, you turn the horn down, okay, now you can get 96 dB easy and match them up. Well worth then the price. They're expensive though. They're kind of expensive, these super tweeters, depending on what model you want. But they go all the way up to $1,000, depending on the model you want. They make 3 different models. And they can be matched up where if you are trying to get that 9th degree out of your, let's say, clips, I'm giving that an example, you're not going to be able to do it because there's no way to turn the horns down. So you're not putting out more energy towards the horn than you are towards your mid-range or bass speaker that's in there. And I got these in my other home that was a lot more damp to about 30 hertz. And like I said, I tested them between the 31 to 25 hertz. It's a 3 dB drop. And that's according to the stereophile test CD that I tested. So I got a 3 dB drop between 31 to 25. So the 25 is going to be a little softer by 3 dB. That's what I'm getting. Of course, like I said, this isn't an anechoic chamber or anything else. And a little bit of warning, a lot of people go out there, they buy the Cornwells, they buy the Fortes, whatever. A lot of these clip speakers are getting great reviews. But remember, you may go to the salon, you may listen to them, oh, they sound great. I'm not talking surround sound with your TV. I'm talking about directly to system stereo, 2 speaker stereo, and they become fatiguing. And a lot of people that buy those speakers, after a time, they catch on that, something's wrong. The speakers, I become fatigued. That's because of that mid-range and stuff is just too much on horn speakers. That can happen. So a lot of manufacturers are changing their horns over, American, French, German, so that mid-range doesn't do that. So they sound, basically, as good as these Altec voice of the theaters. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to achieve what these Altecs you're looking at are doing. That's what they're doing. Because they understood, or they understand, the fatigue factor that hobbyists buy these horns, and then they look for the door of trying to sell them or and trade them up or change them out. They realize, you know what, and you see a lot of them on the market because of that, where a lot of these horns, like the Altecs, were the same way, were fatiguing. People put them in their basement. They didn't use them anymore. They were rock and roll because they played loud. You don't buy speakers because they play loud. You buy speakers because they play good, in your room and for your system. Loud, any speaker can really do loud, but that's when you're younger, everything's got to be loud. Then as they get older, they realize, loud isn't what I want. I want things to sound real. I want things in space to be tight, articulated. I want to hear everything, because you develop into an audiophile. You finally move away from blasting everything to now it's time to enjoy being an audiophile and really listening to your records and CDs like they do on Stereophile and so on. So anyway, that's it for this video. I just want to bring you up to date on my mistake. I thought they were more efficient They are not. They're less efficient, and maybe that's why I was able to marry them in with the super tweeters so easily than what like Steve on the Audiophiliac said that he couldn't get them to work with the Altecs because not the Altecs, the clips, because the clips are just too sound pressure level is 104 on the Cornwells. So until next time, enjoy your stereo, whatever it is, and talk to you then.